Sacred Sites with Steve Ray, here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
So today we're going to have our first Mass at a holy site. We already did it on the Sea of Galilee at the hotel, but now we're going to have our first Mass at a holy site. And it's you got to watch people's faces as they come in. We've already entered the place last week. We're now going down and being seated outside. It's an outside Mass. We're looking out over the Sea of Galilee. That's why I picked this site. And all of a sudden, people are just like, oh, I can't believe that I'm really here. And it's kind of like, pinch yourself, you really are here. And when you get home, you're going to say, I can't believe that I was really there. And that's kind of the way people get reacted to it. But people ask me, do you ever get tired of going to these places? Because I've been to the Mount of Beatitudes. We've had Mass there over 100 times. And, you could think it would get kind of mundane, but it's not, because I always say to people, no, because I just watched all of you walk in and I get to see it the first time again through your eyes. I watched you come in to see it. And I remember the day that I first came there and I cried through the whole Mass. So we have this is what you get. And also, by the way, when you get there, you got to listen, because when Jesus was there were birds singing, right? I love bird watching. That's one of our hobbies. And in Matthew 6, when he taught there, because that's part of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, look at the birds of the air. Well, you're sitting right there. These are the birds that he saw. They're the birds that he heard. They neither reap nor sow. They have more value. You have more value than they do. So Jesus is listening to the birds, and people that are listening to him hear the birds. And so during the whole Mass, the birds are right in the trees right above our head, making all kinds of noise. And it's really quite, to be where Jesus was and to hear what he is saying, what he heard. So everybody takes their rosaries. We make sure they have rosaries. They put them under the altar, because when those rosaries go back home, they've touched all the rosary sites. And this is for us a rosary site, the third luminous mystery, which we'll get to in a minute. So everybody puts their rosaries under there so that they can say when they got home that these touched all the holy sites and they were blessed at every one of the Masses. People cry when they get those as gifts, by the way. Now, the Mass readings are site-specific. I don't know that I've mentioned this before, but if I did, it was a while ago. So when we go to these holy sites, it's not, you don't bring your Magnificat, because it's not going to do you any good, because the readings are site-specific. So every day at the Beatitudes, the readings are the Beatitudes. Doesn't matter whether it's Saturday, Sunday, Monday, April, May, or June, you're always going to read the Beatitudes while you're there. Sister gives us the readings, and they're always the same. And I always joke the priest, do you want the Polish, the French, or the English? But so of course we give them the English. And in there's the readings, and the first reading is usually 1 Corinthians, where it talks about the foolishness of God and the wisdom of men, and how what we think is wise is really foolish in God's eyes. Because then we go to the reading of blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who suffer. And it just seems contradictory that we want to always say, blessed are those who are rich, blessed are those who are happy, blessed are those who have power, blessed are those who never get sick and are always healthy. But it's the opposite. The wisdom of God is different than the wisdom of man. And so those are always the readings that we read at this site. And the priest has limitations. When a priest comes with me, he has to preach no more than 10 minutes. There's a 10-minute homily limitation, because many of these Mass sites there's other groups lined up to get in there. And I had one priest when we started, and he just went on and on and on. And the sister was coming out and going, tell him to stop, tell him to stop. So I said, you tell him to stop. So from that point on, priests have a 10-minute homily limit, because we have time limitations, and that's one of the restrictions that we have. So these homilies range all kinds of different ways. It's fun to think back on all the different homilies and how priests have presented the Beatitudes while we're standing there. And I remind him, Father, when you go up there, this is your first Mass at a holy site on this pilgrimage. You are in persona Christi. You are standing in Jesus's sandals. and you're standing in his sandals where he preached. So you better be pretty darn good when you're up here today, because you're standing there representing Christ. But they're always representing Christ, and that's one of the things that a priest love when they come there. They also, our priests always hear confession on the fly. So example, say you're at this mass and you're convicted of sin, and you're like, oh my goodness, I did this, and I need to be forgiven. You don't want to go through the rest of the pilgrimage with that on your soul. So the priest always has, I forget what the name of it is right off, but around his neck, and a stole, and he is ready to hear confessions at the drop of a hat. And it's very wonderful to see people go off and the priest sit with them and talk to them for a few moments, confess. By the way, I went to confession on Saturday, and I always like coming out better than I do going in. But I always say to the priest, those are the most beautiful words I've ever heard. Thank you so much for being a priest. And it always surprises them. But that's a good idea, folks. When you go into confession, tell them how much you appreciate what he just told you in the name of Jesus, and tell them that. Thank him for being a priest. So now the priest, we are looking down over the slope, and you can hear the fishermen out there at night from up in this location. And it's just a beautiful sight. And Jesus spoke there to 20,000 people. We talked about that last week. There's always some crazy people, because these sites fill up. And some that just think they're going to walk right through our mass. So I'm the police. Every time when we're having a mass, I'm the police. I sit in the back and I keep my eye on the whole thing, because you have no idea the crazy things that happen when you're on a pilgrimage, especially during mass. So we always pray the third luminous mystery when the mass is done, and that is the proclamation of the gospel. And certainly this is where Jesus was proclaiming the gospel. And he says there in Matthew 5, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Now, one of the things that I love to do with our groups is to draw their attention to things so that they understand, what did Jesus see? What are you seeing? And so on. Now, right up above where we are on a big hill, there's a city called Safed. Safed, and it's up on a hill, and it was there during the time of Jesus as well. And guess what you see at night? That's lit up. You can't hide it. That city is sitting up on a hill. And Jesus says, you're the light to the world. You are like a city set on a hill, which cannot be hidden. What hill was he talking about? He was talking about that specific mountain right there with Safed sitting up there. That's the one he was talking about. So when you go home and you read that passage, you don't just think of a generic hill anymore. You actually see Safed, which Jesus was talking about. And he says, don't you think about what you eat and drink and what you wear. You're more important than what you have clothes. Consider the lilies of the field. And guess what we see while we're walking back to the bus? The Mount of Beatitudes, the sisters have turned it into a garden. There's all kinds of flowers. And when you consider the lilies of the field, how they grow, they neither toil nor spin. Yet you, even Solomon in all his glory, was not arrayed like one of these, and yet you're more important than all of those plants. And if I take care of those, I'll take care of you. So we have to think about this. And I always give people a half an hour after the Mass to get their Bibles out. Sometimes most people have their Bible now on an iPhone, so certainly I do. And you can read that 3 chapters. It's the longest sermon in the Bible. It's the longest homily, so to speak, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And it's Jesus telling about the kingdom of God. And you can see people go off and sit down in the bushes and read that and pray. And it's hard to get people out of there. Tim, I have a hard time getting people out of there because it's such a nice place, but there's great cappuccino and coffee on the way out, and we have to use the restrooms because we've got an hour drive, but we got to see inside. Oh my goodness, my time's running out. It's always running out there too. On a pilgrimage, we're always saying, come on, folks, we got to go because there's so much to see and we got to get all the way to the north. But we do let people get a coffee and use the restrooms and look inside the church. There's a nice church there made for the Beatitudes. And now everybody's on the bus. I get them on there. It's hard. I go back and catch them lost sheep. Come on, let's go get them back on the bus. Got an hour to drive. And that's what we're going to talk about next week, our drive up north to Caesarea Philippi, which is where Jesus said, you are Peter. That's our next stop.
Sacred Sites with Steve Ray is heard live every Monday on the Guadalupe Radio Network program Morning Joy, hosted by Keith Downey. For more authentic Catholic content, go to grnonline.com/joy.